My name's Scott. I'm an alcoholic. Hi, everybody. I'd like to thank John for asking me to come and share today, and I'd like to thank the committee and everybody responsible for putting this deal together. My wife and I have been shown tremendous hospitality and kindness. I'd like to thank my mother-in-law and father-in-law for coming and to hear me speak today. And if my wife would overcome her humility and stand, I'd like you to help me welcome her. My wife, Nancy, would you please stand up, please? And that locks me into the truth pretty much for the day. My friend Milton M. is here. I met him when I was not sober, getting the gift of step none. When I was new, a bunch of guys are here that I sponsor, so I'm pretty well locked into the truth. I've heard so many remarkable speakers in the last couple of days. My cup is full. I've certainly heard all I need to hear here. Can I see the hands of people in their first year? Wow, great. If you've heard my story before, I'm sorry. I only have the one. Don't move your lips. I only have the one. If you're new here and you're anything like me, you're looking around the room and you're saying to yourself, Alcoholics Anonymous. How the hell did I wind up in Alcoholics Anonymous? I mean, this isn't even lame. This is beyond lame. This is beyond synagogue, beyond church, beyond any plateau of lameness I ever imagined was available to me. Alcoholics Anonymous. Welcome. I didn't belong here. I was Jewish. Jews don't drink. It might dull the pain. My wife and I we were lucky enough to be invited to attend a mini conference in Omaha, and I thought they had me out for a Jew hunt. How does a kid from the Bronx wind up talking about alcoholism in Omaha, Nebraska is pretty well beyond me. I was brought up to a family which I figured was completely out of their minds in the Bronx in New York City. My wife never really believed me about my family until she met them. And my mom threw a party for us, and my aunt wore her wig backwards, and it had a bun on it. And it wasn't a mistake. It was a look she was going after, you know. I had one grandma who had a lot of trouble. She had a lot of trouble, and I won't take her inventory, but she had a lot of difficulties. She had some mental problems, and she made clothing for my brother and I, and we looked like we were from Mars. And my mother, Mitchell and I would put on the clothes and look at each other and go, "Oh my God!" And my mother would say, "Would I let you leave the house if you didn't look gorgeous?" And at about 12, we looked at each other and said, no. I had this same aunt. If you got something for free in my family, it meant it was stolen. And I had an uncle who was a welder, and he used to get bales of steel wool, free bales of steel wool. And my aunt took a decorating course and made throw pillows and filled all the throw pillows with the steel wool. So, you know, that stuff works its way through on you. And if you were in their house, everybody'd be moving a little bit. There'd be a little motion. The whole room was a little kinetic, you know. I had this uncle, was one of the top 10 welterweights of the world during the 30s, and he was owned by the Purple Gang in New York. My grandmother thought they were like the Cub Scouts. It was Murder Incorporated. And he was concerned with anti-Semitism. He was fighting down in Atlanta, Georgia, and I wish I was lying about this because this is my genetic pool. Changed his name from Izzy Redmond to Izzy Goldberg so no one would know he was Jewish. Now, we all have interesting families, right? Everybody's got an interesting family. And as crazy as my family was, they had not one thing to do with making me an alcoholic. Not one single solitary thing to do. And if you're new here, all I got is good news for you. And that's great news. They can't make me, you see, when normal people get anxious, they don't shoot a quarter grain of heroin in their hip, you know. No matter how difficult their wives and families might be, you know, I do. That's what I do. You see, and it's good news because if my family had made me an alcoholic, I could go to therapy and I could work out my family problems and then drink properly. Not. So I want to alleviate you of that concern right off the bat if you're new. It doesn't matter how much therapy you do. It does not matter how much of your family problems you work out. You will never drink successfully again if you're an alcoholic. If you're not an alcoholic, what's wrong with you? What is wrong with you? What is your problem, man? Consider the alternatives. You might want to catch alcoholism. If you're a drug addict and you're special, you can still catch alcoholism. My sponsor early on explained to me the difference between a drug addict and an alcoholic. He said, Scott, look, an alcoholic will steal your dough, go downtown, get loaded, come back, cry, full of self-pity, and he'll tell you what he did, you know. And a drug addict will steal your dough and go downtown and get loaded and come back to your place and help you look for the money. Now, I had done both. I had helped you look for the money, and I had just gone there and felt sorry for myself. So I qualified for both. But here's the deal. For me, what I needed to do is I needed to catch alcoholism when I got here. I did not have alcoholism when I got here. I don't know what I had. But if you're new, they're going to tell you can't catch it, and they're pretty much lying to you. I got it from you. I got it at these meetings. I caught alcoholism at these meetings, and I have a rotten case of it today. And of course, the weirdest thing about this disease, if you don't get it, you die from it. And if you catch it, you get better. It's a pretty remarkable thing. When I was a young man growing up in the Bronx, my father thought he was a loser, and I completely agreed with him. Now, my father never made more than $10,000 a year. My brother and I never missed a meal and never went to school with ripped clothing. My last year out there, I made about $80,000 a year. My children did go to school with ripped clothing, and they did miss meals. How had my father become a loser? My father had become a loser because a certain kind of thinking had become established in me. I'm a man with alcoholic tendencies. And a certain kind of thinking had become established in me that had placed me beyond human help. What kind of thinking? Well, if you're new here, if you've been drinking at exactly the wrong time, if you've been building up a bright outlook for yourself and your family and tearing it down around your ears in a senseless series of sprees, if you fail to recall with sufficient force the memory of the pain and humiliation of a day, a week, a second ago, and repeat the same insane behavior over and over again, if you protect your right to vomit, you could have alcoholism. If you get excited when you're told you need dental surgery, yeah, they don't clap at the Rotary for that, pal. No one at the Rotary goes, dental surgery. But you guys know that's an uninterrupted source of good drugs for a period of time. You could have alcoholism. Newcomers, we're going to tell you what we're going to do to you, and then we're going to do it to you anyway. You can find out if you want. Get a copy of our book and read the 7th chapter, and it's going to tell you exactly, the sadistic 7th chapter, and it's going to tell you exactly what we're going to do. It says, get a man while he's down. The worst he's ever been, crushed up, just coming off a bender. hardly in his senses. Get him then. Talk to him. Get him to relate to you. Get him to laugh with you. Get him to cry with you. And once he's identified with you, heap upon him evidence as to the hopelessness of his situation. Always good news for the new man. Then it says, stress the spiritual angle freely. Really good news for the new man. You know, you hear sometimes, geez, don't talk about God, you'll scare them away. I don't know where they're running away to, but our book says you can go right to it if you want. Our book talks about a threefold illness. Now, newcomers, you're going to hear some pretty colossally stupid things about alcoholism now that you're here. One of the most remarkably stupid, for my money, is people who, outside of the program, might even say to you, geez, don't you just think you're using AA as a crutch? Now, that's a complete negation of any concept that this is a disease. It's sort of like saying to the diabetic, still on that insulin crutch? Saying to the cancer patient, boy, I think you're really relying on that chemotherapy a little too much, I think it shows a weakness. Now, if alcoholism isn't a disease, man, thousands and thousands of people are dying all over the world every day. Look to the skies. Something strange is happening if alcoholism isn't a disease. But you'll hear some pretty silly things about alcoholism from people who don't understand it. And here's the good news: they don't have to understand it. All right. And our book talks about the fact that we're attacked on three fronts. We're attacked on a physical front, and if you want to read our doctor's opinion in our book, it's an incredible description. Some of the description in there about a whole class of people who experience a phenomenon of craving, and they drink not because they're weak, but because they're drinking to overcome a craving beyond their control. Right? And then it talks about a certain kind of thinking, and our second and third chapters really describe this thinking, this thing you hear a lot about at meetings, alcoholic thinking. My home group a couple of weeks ago, a guy told a story. It was one of the most beautiful examples of alcoholic thinking I'd ever heard. He said, right before he got sober, he had been pulled in by the police with drunk driving, and he's chained to a bench in this police station. He had just urinated on himself, and he said out loud, "I got to stop driving." And that's it. The first story, the first illustration I ever had of alcoholic thinking, and it happened where me and Milton used to, my first home group where I met Milton M. And if you've been around, you've heard it, and I'm just going to tell it for the newcomers, because it was the first thing I heard about alcoholic thinking that just a flare went off in my head. That if a normal person, a psychotic, and an alcoholic all walked through a door and got hit square in the face with a 2x4, the normal person would never walk through that door again. The psychotic would walk through several more times and then eventually learn to not walk through again. The alcoholic would walk through, get hit over and over again, and one day he'd walk through and he wouldn't get hit, and he'd go, I can wait for the guy. I can wait for him. Probably needed coffee. He'll come back. And then that book in our fourth and fifth chapter, in a fourth chapter in a very beautiful way, talks about our spiritual illness. And once that mental obsession that someday he or she will drink like a normal person gets mixed up with that craving, it seems to cause a cancer of the soul that no one else really understands unless they have it themselves, which creates the tapeworm of alcoholism, which eats alcoholics up from the inside and leaves them hollow, and unfortunately leaves everybody else around them hollow. And then our fifth chapter actually has clear-cut instructions on how to overcome this spiritual malady that keeps driving us back to the bottle. When I was a young man and I took a drink of alcohol, I went down to the middle of my bones. You know, the part of the bone that makes red blood cells. I experienced a mental and physical release from a drink of alcohol that normal people do not experience. Normal people don't dream about drinking. My mother has never dreamt about walking into a palace made of cocaine. She's never had that dream. If you're new here and you're dreaming about getting drunk, you could have alcoholism. Call me a nut. And hold on to that dream, man. That'll help you take step one. Maybe you're bodily and mentally different from your fellows. If it's in there like that, you know. I was introduced to an Old Testament God when I was a kid that I would not be caught in a dark alley with. Man, this God got your ass. He got you. You had to speak a foreign language to talk to him? He got you. He turned your wife to salt. He put a finger in your eye and killed your goat, and he got you. And it didn't no matter where you ran and what you did. And I wanted to have absolutely nothing to do with this God. I was a hip, slick, and cool kid in the Bronx growing up. I hung out with a bunch of very intelligent young men who were stealing cars and running them into each other until they couldn't move anymore. Because these guys were drinking, and I had to drink. And I began the process, which I didn't even know I was beginning, which was the process of rearranging my life to accommodate alcoholism, which was to eventually rearrange everything in my life, every aspect of my life, every part of my relationships, my approach to money, to sex, to friends, to art, to food, to everything. Had to be rearranged to accommodate the walk to the drink, because I was going to take the walk to the drink no matter what. I entered psychotherapy at the age of 14, and I stayed in psychotherapy for 18 years. And I was on the brink of being a very well-analyzed corpse by the time I got to, to Alcoholics Anonymous. I was going to be dead with no Oedipal complex at all. And, man, it is so confusing going to therapy and doing good work and dying. I did great work in therapy. And I was dying from alcoholism because it couldn't treat it. I didn't drink because of my fears, my resentments, or my sexual problems. It's the bizarre catch-22 of AA. I drank because I'm a drunk. I'll drink if I don't do something about them. If I don't do something about my fears, my resentments, and my sexual problems, the day will come where I will drink again, where I'll be spiritually fit and unfit and drink again. You hear at meetings sometimes, people say, I choose to stay sober today. That's always kind of neat for me. When I was new, I liked that. That was a good idea. Choose to stay sober today and see how I feel the next day. And maybe I'll drink Saturday and I'll choose to stay sober Sunday and see what... The book says I've lost the power of choice with drink. The guys I sponsor who are dead today, none of them chose to get drunk. I knew these guys. Not one of them who's dead chose to get drunk. He was spiritually unfit and he drank. He got the gift of step none and he drank. It's as simple as that. I mean, even if they're spiritually unfit, they weren't able at that point to not drink no matter what. I set some lofty goals for myself as a young man, and by the time I got sober, I had reached or surpassed them all. I had a book on the bestseller list. I had acted in a Broadway play. I had directed a film. I directed a TV show. I had my own theater in New York. I was assistant artistic director of a theater. I had done all of these things a time. I never got to do any of them more than once, because I'd leave and they'd move the business, so I couldn't find it again. And the reason why was people were horrible to me. Horrible to me. Mean to me. When I took the X-ray of my illness, the only X-ray we have of alcoholism is an inventory. Other diseases, they give you, blood tests and X-rays and all sorts of CAT scans and stuff. We just have an inventory. That's the test. Everyone can pass if you do one. And sometimes guys I work with say, they start writing in and they say, can I come over and just read you what I've got? And I really encourage them not to do it. I really encourage them, if they can, to wait until they can do the whole thing, until they can see the whole mess in its magnificent, gigantic splendor, until they can see what they've done. And if they can do that, perhaps they will be so crushed under the weight of it, crushed and demoralized and deflated at depth, that they can perhaps get this thing. That they could perhaps see that there's another way, that their treatment for alcoholism is a calamitous failure. So when I did my inventory, I saw that early on, people were talking behind my back. A little later on, they started doing things behind my back, and then they started thinking behind my back. In the last 2 years, which is terrible. It's a terrible thing. It's hard to catch them. Yeah, but you can catch them. You just have to accuse them of it all the time, and you'll get them. My life just kept slipping out between my fingers like a handful of water over and over again. And my deal was I drank till I didn't want to be a drunk, and I triumphed over alcohol through the use of marijuana. And I kicked marijuana with pills. And I was victorious over pills with heroin. And I overcame heroin with cocaine. Cocaine's a great drug. It's good for sex if you enjoy sex from the Neolithic period. Then I drank till I didn't want to be a drunk, and this is Alcoholics Anonymous. I am an alcoholic, but part of my story does involve drugs. It's important for me to share it so I can share my recovery with you. It's the way I stayed out of being an alcoholic. One of the main ways was by swapping those addictions. When I was 19 years old, I shot some heroin, and my father had a massive stroke, and I went to the hospital, and I couldn't be there for him during his death. I couldn't be there for my mother or my brother, and I felt like a pig, like an animal. Holes in my arms, stoned. It was something I would never live down and never be able to live with. I couldn't be there for my dad the night that he died. So I drank till I didn't want to be a drunk and snorted cocaine till I didn't want to be a cocaine addict. I swore I'd never put a needle in my arm again, and I didn't. Sometime after this, I met a remarkable woman. And I had rearranged my life pretty well to accommodate alcoholism. One day, a friend of mine was over at my house, and he looked on my desk, and he went, "Oh, my God." I said, "What?" He looked over, and there was a stack of books. And he said, "Look at the titles of the books on your desk." And I looked over, and it said, "On Death and Dying," "The Idiot," "Despair." And this was my recreative reading. Unbelievable, but I had rearranged my life to accommodate alcoholism. I was going to take the walk to the drink no matter what, no matter who you are and what you were. If you got in between me and the drink, I walked around you or I walked through you, but believe me, I would get there. And I fancied myself an artist who was brave enough and insightful enough to go to that cold, icy, black edge of life, peer over, and come back and report to you. I was usually too loaded to report what I'd seen or remember it. But that was my job. Unbelievable. And I met this woman. I was acting in a Broadway play. I was playing a greaser, kind of a Hell's Angel character. I played rock and roll on stage. And this young woman walked into the theater, brand new usherette. I wasn't running around at that theater at that time, and I took one look at this woman. One look at her, I walked back into the dressing room, I stood on a chair, and I said, "If anyone talks to the new usherette with long brown hair, I'll break all the tiny bones in your hands and feet." And this usherette, she saw me do a performance, and she read my bio in the program, and she saw that I was a filmmaker, and she came in the next day with a big book that said Orson Welles on it, and sat in the back row like this, so I'd have a way to strike up a conversation. Like that. And I felt I just plummeted into love for this woman named Nancy. She was everything I wanted to be around. She was from the Midwest. She didn't seem Jewish to me. She was great. She seemed carefree. She seemed to not have this tremendous weight that I had. She was just terrific, and we just fell instantly in love. And now, if you had written everything I did in 8 years of marriage down in a book and gave it to this woman and had her read it and say, "Would you live with this?" She'd say, "Who would live with this?" But you spread it out over 8 years, throw in chronic success, throw in a best-selling book. Sure, you'd live with it. Throw in the fact that when I started the walk to the drink, quite often I was telling the truth. Got a little murky over here, okay. It's quite often an out-and-out lie by the time I got here. But very often it was the truth over here. And yeah, you'd live with it. It'll chip away at you. My wife got terribly ill from prolonged exposure to me. And I'll tell you, man, you live with a drunk, you had better get yours. You had better get yours. I don't care where it is, if in the bank account, the refrigerator, I don't care where it is. No matter what he says or she says, you had better get yours. Because it will be gone no matter what they say. And it will make you sick. It will make you selfish, dishonest, inconsiderate. It will make you crazy. From alcoholism, but we didn't know we had alcoholism in our home. We had two remarkable sons, both of whom became pretty sick from alcoholism. By the time I got sober, my older child was diagnosed as virtually functionally retarded, and he was making involuntary clicking sounds with his throat that he couldn't stop making in school. His small motor skills were pretty messed up. He had to do some special ed classes. He was cut off from the society of other children from being scared. Fear ought to be classed with stealing. It seems to cause more trouble. The fabric of our lives is shot through with it. And how horribly true for the young people who were affected by alcoholism. And both of our children became terribly ill. My in-laws, who are wonderful people, I was usually pretty good at picking people, who would roll over pretty good for me, And I made a mistake. I made a real big mistake one time. I was invited out to this University of Michigan to do some teaching. And the guy had known me from New York, and I was in the middle of a drug run. And he had me out there to do some teaching. And afterwards I said, "Look, the university's going to be a little late paying me. Could you lend me the money? And when I get the check from the university, I'll send it to you." Well, I blew it. I really did make a mistake. This guy got real grouchy, and he Xeroxed both checks with my signatures on them and wrote a letter to everyone he knew that I knew, every member of my family who he knew, everybody he knew that I had ever worked for, and sent him a copy of this. And I was in my father-in-law and mother-in-law's house when they got this document, and I saw my father-in-law get the document, and I saw a little bit of him die that day. And a little bit of me died that day because I didn't get it. I didn't get it. I didn't know I had alcoholism. I didn't know that I was dying. And our family became sicker and sicker. And I want to express my gratitude to my in-laws today because I never, ever got anything but love from these people. Never. They never looked at me cross-eyed. Now, if you think you can enable an alcoholic, more power to you. You could either make me a drunk with money or a drunk without money. You certainly weren't going to sober me up by not giving me money. If you could, I think we can go out with some cash now and get everybody well. The person who's doing it can make a decision whether or not they want to unload the money, but for me, I don't see how I can enable a drunk, personally. They never enabled me. I want to tell you, they were so loving and accepting of me that when I got sober, it made it that much easier for me to rejoin the family in a way that was good for me. And I want to express my thanks to them. Sometime after this, I put a needle in my arm again. Why? Because it was there. I had no mental offense against it. I crossed a line that I swore that I would never cross again, and I called my therapist of record, that it was a new therapist, a Jungian therapist, who I was seeing at that time. And it was kind of interesting because I was to find out after reading our book that Dr. Jung actually had quite a bit to do with the founding of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I called him that next morning, and I told him what I had done, and he said to me, "There's absolutely nothing that can be done for you." I said, "What?" He said, "I can't help you. The only thing I can suggest is a meeting of Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, or we have you institutionalized." Now, on most other days, I would have gladly chosen the institution. That would have been fine with me. Chance to meet more colorful, artistic, interesting people. I was never going to jail. I was working on a prison novel. Actually, what I did was I went to an AA meeting that next day, and then I came home and I poured a glass of wine for myself, and I turned around, and Nancy was giving me the look, that look. And I said, "What?" She said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Honey, these people aren't fanatics. You don't stop drinking completely. You have a glass of wine. These are civilized people. They're not a bunch of Huns, Nancy and I had become so ill together. A guy lent us his car, and we sold it. We sold the car. That's like house sitting for someone, and they come back, and you're in escrow, We sold the guy's car. His voice on the phone was, "You sold my car?" Years later, when I paid the guy back, his voice was exactly the same. "You're paying me back?" I try to share this every time I share because it was one of my most beautiful pieces of alcoholic thinking. We had these 32-ounce tumblers in the house, and I came home and popped a cork on a bottle of wine and emptied the whole bottle of wine into the glass, and I turned around, and there was the look, man. I said, "What?" She said, "What are you doing?" And completely seriously, I said, "I'm having a glass of wine." Can a man have a glass of wine in his own home? What a wet towel. Blanket, I'm sorry, dear. So I went to that first meeting, I went to that second meeting, and I had already sent some money to Texas for some drugs, a new drug I had never had before, and it came up and I had already paid for it. It was an incumbent upon me to take the drug. It was a drug called ecstasy, great name. I took it. Who was it? Who did it? There you go. What other club in the world to drug get a round of applause? It's unbelievable. Well, I love this stuff, man. I didn't feel Jewish once I took it. I mean, it was incredible. And I took it and I went, I'm not going to need that AA deal. This is unbelievable. I feel new, and it wore off. It wore off. Oh man, it wore off. And that morning, I woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I put on my best clothes, and got a bad check to write you. Went down to report to Alcoholics Anonymous. Alcoholics Anonymous. I couldn't believe it. A 7 a.m. meeting. Everyone there had one tooth and it had a cavity in it. Man, they're all wearing belt buckles large enough to serve a whole fish. Alcoholics Anonymous. I couldn't believe it. I'm looking around the room. I couldn't believe I was in an AA meeting. I'm a major guy. What am I doing in an AA meeting? And if you're new here, you are now privy to an unending reservoir of unsolicited advice and information. I mean, I'm here. Isn't it bad enough that I'm here? Now they're going to talk to you. They're going to talk to you. Oh, man, I couldn't believe it. And you see, the kind of bully I am, I'm a nice guy. That's my first shot out of the gate. I'm a nice guy. That's how I get people to do what I want them to do. So I would grin and nod and pray that their face would burst into flame. No, just blow up. Blow up, man. I couldn't believe it. I don't know why I came back. I guess I was out of plans. If you're new here, I hope you're out of plans. If you got one, it's probably a beaut. Tell us the plan. Grab one of us after the meeting. Tell us the plan. Don't use the plan. We want to know it. And I guess I was out of plans enough, and I stuck around and just hated you. And I met my friend Milton. I was a week sober and a couple of days sober, and he and I went to that same meeting, and I love him. I love him so much. He's always meant so much to me. And I met his family, and my wife reached out. She knows it was 37 days, right? She went to her first Al-Anon meeting and said, "My name's Nancy, and my husband's sober 37 days." And that was all the airtime I got at Al-Anon, I think some of the women started drooling when they heard her identify that way, and then she went after her own miracle, and we met Milton's family, and my wife got to meet Milton's wife Ruby, and we started seeing what a sober family was like, and I saw them, and I said, this is great. I'm so happy for them, and there's two things usually a newcomer can say to make me know he's going to drink. One is when he's happy for me. I'm so happy for you. Well, I want to tell you something. When I was new and people said they had a great life, I was just thrilled to death. I was just so happy for them. And I would say to myself, well, if you went home and your new home exploded, and your kids exploded, and you exploded, because I'm so happy for you. When they're saying they're happy for me, it's usually, hey, I'm happy for you, Take a hike, The other thing they can say is when they say, drinking's the furthest thing from my mind. Oh, my God. To that I usually reply, no, your mind is the furthest thing from your mind. Because that's just another way for a new guy to keep you away. Don't tell me, don't go through the thing, don't start now, I don't want to drink, okay? Will you leave me alone now? Go talk to someone who needs you. But I was so happy for Milton. And I would look at his kids, these remarkable daughters of his, and I said, no way. No way. Not in my home. No way. Not going to happen. So I stuck around Alcoholics Anonymous. I was about 6 months sober. I thought I'd worked the first 3 steps, and I was completely out of my mind. I was suffering from untreated alcoholism, which is an ugly thing. I find it particularly unattractive in people who are not drinking. You can tell them at the meetings. They usually have a vein pumping like a garden hose on their head. You can count all the ligaments in their neck, and they leave a trail of light when they walk. Untreated alcoholism. Man, it's a beast. Well, I thought I worked step 3, but our book says the third step will have little permanent or lasting effect unless immediately followed by a fourth. I had not done that, so I guess the third step's going to kind of come and go. I'm really not going to have it. So I guess I worked the first 2 steps. I had admitted I was an alcoholic. That's a fatal illness. that my life was unmanageable, and that I'd come to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity, which you don't need unless you're insane. So I had admitted I was dying, my life sucked, and I was nuts. How come I didn't feel any better? Why should I have felt any better? There's no reason why I should have felt any better after a period of time. So when I was about 6 months sober, I asked a guy to sponsor me, and this guy, I heard him talk about God, and he didn't sound like a sap to me. And I liked this guy, and he brought me to his house, and he sat me down, and that one afternoon he addressed every problem I have ever had or ever will have. That one afternoon he addressed every single one of them right then and there. He addressed my hatred of you, my loathing of myself, my paralyzing fears, and unsolvable sexual problems, all there that afternoon, that day. Now, you hear sometimes in a program, and I know it's true for certain people, that they say, I mostly resented myself. Well, I hated me, but man, I really hated you. I hated you so much more than I hated me, I can't even begin to tell you. I hated me good. I hated you gooder, And I'm not, and I was speaker this afternoon with Sherman, and I'm the same way. I am not a suicide guy. I am a homicide guy. I definitely, I go right. I vastly prefer your death to mine any day of the week. If I kill all of you, there'd be no different reason to kill myself anyway. And one of the things I love when I give instructions in a fourth step is, I love when a man says, I really have no resentments. Man, I tell you, when that happens, it's like having a great poker hand. All you got to do is make sure that your hand doesn't shake when you reach for the chips, Because then you get to look at them and say, so you like everyone in your family. So you loved everyone in elementary school. So you are a friend of the clergy. And you love all the governments of the world. You're an amazing human being. This is the fastest way to end a relationship with a newcomer, is to show them this work. So my sponsor showed me that work, and I did 1, 2, and 3 with him as he read chapter 5 to me. He gave me instructions in a fourth step, and I did that fourth step. And I came over to his house, and I did that fifth step. It's an amazing thing. That step 5 in the description of the fifth step in our book, it talks about the double life of the alcoholic, and there's so many things I didn't understand. I never wanted to be a bad dad. I wanted to get out of AA, and I was sober a couple of months, and I kept saying to myself, I haven't hurt my kids, I haven't hurt my kids, I haven't done that. That's one thing I haven't done. And I was on the phone with a guy, and it came to me that a couple of months before I had sobered up, I was with my older son, and I was hungover, and I got sick in front of him. And in response, he got sick. And what happened to me that morning was that I realized that the only reason that my son had gotten sick was because he was with his father. He had not eaten bad food. He did not have a virus. He was with his father. His father had made him sick. My perfect, beautiful, blonde son got sick that morning, and the only reason was because he was with me. And it was so clear to me at that moment, so clear to me because you had shared with me what you had done, what had happened with your kids. You made it possible for me to admit that to myself. You didn't do it anymore. Milton didn't do it anymore. And you made it possible for me to stick around Alcoholics Anonymous and stick around long enough to ask that guy to sponsor me and stick around long enough to do that inventory. That double life of the alcoholic. And it says, we crushed this stuff back down, and it says, and God, this was so important for me, it says, it made for more drinking. It didn't make for drinking. I drank because I'm a drunk. I'll never be anything but. No amount of therapy, and I'm not putting therapy down. It's great stuff. As a treatment for alcoholism, it's worse than useless. As a treatment for other things, it's great. As a treatment for alcoholism, it's a treadmill. For me, it was for me. So I did that 5th step. I did 6 and 7 for the first time, which have kind of become my template, my working relationship with God. And it came time to do my 8th step list. And I didn't want to put my dad down there. He was dead, and there's nothing I could do about that. And my sponsor said, do you owe him an amends? And I said, absolutely. He said, well, you put him down. I said, what can I? He said, you put him down. Do your job in Alcoholics Anonymous. Put him on the list. You'll find some service. You'll find a way. You'll find a key. You put him on the list. Now, the best reading I have ever heard of the 8th step in my life, newcomers, happened in my home group. I'll never forget it. It was done by a guy I've never seen again. It was a guy named Nino. He had a heavy New York accent. He was wearing hospital plastic. He had never seen Chapter 5 before, and he was asked to read at this men's meeting I go to. And he was reading Chapter 5. He was reading the steps. He never read it before, and he got up to 8. He said, made a list of all those we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Jesus Christ! And he looked out into the crowd as if to say, have you guys seen this? Do you know what's in here? It was so beautiful, man. It was exactly what happened to me. No, not those people, not that money. I wouldn't have taken that much money if I had known. No, please, God, not that, not that. Anything but that. Well, if you're new here again, all I got is good news. That's 8 steps from where you are right now, so you ain't got it. And it's not the 8th you really got to worry about. It's the 9th that's really going to get you, so don't worry about it. So I put my dad down there, and I started doing my job in Alcoholics Anonymous. You guys said this was one drunk talking to another, and I was pretty unimpressed with that. I had been talking to drunks my whole life. Not much good had ever come of it. And what you meant was that if I could come into contact with someone in whom my problem had been solved, a recovery could begin. And that's what had happened to me, and that's what happened to my family. They came into contact with someone in whom their problem had been solved, and that person was me. And my wife went off to get her miracle, and the boys... See, I tell you, when I did when I put my family on my 8-step list, it was very clear to me that I'm sorry was not going to cut it. I could have sat my wife and kids down and said, geez, I'm real sorry. Not for me. It just wasn't going to cut it. Things had to change. My kids had to stop being scared. Behavior had to start getting consistent. They had to start counting on certain things that were going to happen if someone said they were going to happen. They had to stop living in a house that was just carpeted with banana peels. Something had to be different. So I had to start doing my job in Alcoholics Anonymous. I wanted what my sponsor had, and then I had the unfortunate experience of finding out how he got it. Man, the guy just never said no. He just never said no. He just kept doing stuff and saying yes and driving to Tehachapi. And he took me to Tehachapi, which I was convinced was a hotbed of anti-Semitism, and they were going to get me up there and kill me, man. And I kept going with him. I had fancied myself a show business big shot, as I told you, and I started working with my sponsor, and I got a job directing situation comedy, and I almost drank over it. See, I thought I was taking the 3rd step, and I was saying, Father, I'm yours. And God says, yeah, I know that. I'm God. I had a feeling you were mine, but I really appreciate the gesture. What do you mean? And I was soon to find out what it meant, that after I almost drank over the show business job, I said, okay, God, this too. You get this too. I'm willing to do anything, and in a couple of months I was working on a catering truck, and I said, no, I didn't mean this. Had some, I heard a guy at a meeting say he prayed for more money and God gave him overtime. So I'm on this catering truck, and I'm catering, on location catering for TV and movies. You make a lot of dough, man. That's a Teamster's job. You're driving a vehicle on a movie set. My first job catering, I'm on a set, and the executive producer and star is a guy who I used to work with in show business. And he sticks his head on the truck that morning, and he says, "Can I have a burrito, Scott?" I said, "What's happening, man?" He said, "Well, is this your truck?" I said, "No, but it's my spatula." Well, I couldn't believe it. I went nuts. I got my sponsor on the phone. I said, "You're not, oh, no, that's the humiliation." And he said, you sound like you have resentment. I said, "Oh, thanks, Einstein. Yeah, I think I might." So I guess you're going to have to sit down and write it down. I'm resentful at Scott for working on a catering truck. It affects my self-esteem, my pocketbook, my ambition, my personal relations and sex. A little knock in the crotch there, a little ego blow. That's a 5-bagger. Now, what are the defects of character in me that if God would remove, the resentment would be gone? I can't ask him. What am I going to ask him to do? Remove the job? Remove the kitchen truck? Remove the guy who saw me on the kitchen truck? All I can do is ask him to remove the poison that without which the resentment would be gone. It is the great destroyer of all alcoholics. It is the source of all spiritual illness. No big thing. It just cuts you off from the sunlight of the Spirit and kills your ass dead. No big deal. They're so nice to us in our book. Aren't they sweet to us in our book? Where they say, we start an inventory, which many of us had never tried. You ever sit down and give him 4th-step instructions and have the guy go, "Wow, you guys do that? That's unbelievable. I've been doing that for years." Many of us had never tried. What are the defects? I have false pride. I'm ungrateful. A lot of guys don't get to work when they get sober. Right? I'm judging myself. I'm a retaliator, retaliating against myself. I'm not trusting in God. Things aren't going according to the Scott Redmond program, the Sterling program. Grandiose. No, don't fight me on this. Grandiose. I'm resentful at the guy. For what? Being hungry? He wanted a burrito. The guy didn't do anything. He didn't rub it in. He wasn't mean to me, but I was resentful at him for seeing me on the truck. And I was resentful at fate. And as time went on, I wound up serving meals to guys who had been my assistant directors. And here was the biggest insult, to actors who I had directed in big-time TV shows, and they didn't recognize me. Because I was the invisible guy with the ladle. And I wrote 10 steps until my hands fell off. Grandiose, self-centered, self-seeking, ungrateful, false pride, not trusting in God, playing God. Finally, I get this call from this big-time public relations company in New York called Ketchum Public Relations, and they offer me this big-time writing job, man, and this is going to do it for me. It's going to do it, and I make this tape, this demo tape for them, and I crash and burn before I even hear about it. I got to sit down. I got to do the 10th step. I surrendered it. I got clean with it, and I was fine. I had done this work long enough so that the spiritual muscle was developed enough so that I was okay. And I get a call from them. They say, "You don't have the job," and I was fine. I get another call right after that one. Says, "Can you cater a commercial up in Lake Arrowhead?" And I said, "Fine." I get up there with the truck and I grab the call sheet, and who's the commercial for? Ketchum Public Relations. They're not only am I now serving them meals, but they are videotaping the making of the commercial. So now they're going to send this tape back to New York, and these guys are going to go, "Is that Scott Redmond with that meatloaf there? What's it?" Oh, the poor guy. So now the humiliation is being videotaped. I call my sponsor. He says, "Well, I guess God had enough writers and needed a few cooks." He's a mean and terrible man. He said, well, you asked God for a job with Ketchum, just didn't tell him what you wanted to do. He's a mean and terrible man. By the time a few years went by, I learned how to give people a dime for their nickel. And I'm a man who the last year out there had 13 W-2 forms. And both the companies that I cook for asked me to go into business with them because I did my job in Alcoholics Anonymous. In my first year of sobriety, I was online to buy lunch, and there was a guy in front of me, and he was buying a can of Colt 45, with loose change and lint and, And he turned around and he looked at me, and instead of saying in my best Bronx, what are you looking at? I said, how you doing? He said, you don't know how I'm doing. Nobody knows how I'm doing except for the people in Alcoholics Anonymous. We went out and we talked, and we exchanged numbers, and that night I went on my first real 12-step call. And some people said, take him down to County General Hospital and dump him off at the door. Don't go in with him. Dump him off at the door. Don't show them that he has ways and means or anything. We went in with him. We went all the way up to the alcoholic ward with him. And about halfway through, he turns to the guy I'm with, and he says, I feel like I'm dying. And the guy I'm with says, that's because you are. And I said, man, what is wrong with you? What a terrible thing to say to this guy. What a cold, insensitive, horrible thing to say to this guy. I want him to like me, right? God forbid the guy shouldn't like me. The guy is in a county facility. He's been told to lie that he's got blood in his urine to break his way into an alcoholic ward. What's the guy supposed to say? You're just having a bad day? No, this isn't a bad day. This is what dying feels like. I'll tell you when you're having a bad day, this isn't it. And if you stick around here for any appreciable amount of time, you'll see men and women walk in here with bottoms that will make your hair stand on end. You will look at that man or woman and you will say they could never drink again. How could they ever drink again? And if they don't treat their alcoholism with the program of action outlined in our book, it won't be their bottom anymore. It'll be a bad day. It'll be a period of time where people were being particularly mean to them and thinking behind their back, and they will get on with the business of dying, and you can see them share their way right out of the program. You can see them share and get nuttier and nuttier and share their way right out. And it is a horrifying, horrifying thing. Dr. Silkworth, who was not an alcoholic, who is administrator of one of the great hospitals dealing with alcoholism and drug addiction in the United States, says in his section of our book, why would I endorse a spiritual altruistic program for the treatment of alcoholism that I don't make $1 on? He says, come with me. If you don't get this, man, come with me. Work with me. See the death, the destruction, the hopeless wives and spouses. See the crushed lives of the children, and you won't ask why I've done this. You won't ask me. Sometime after this, one of the guys I sponsor called me up and said, look, man, stop talking to me about the steps, and if you can work it into your busy schedule, die. And leave me alone. And he ripped some people off in a program. He stole some money from some people. He did an apartment. He stole a car, and he was making me look pretty bad. What? What are you laughing at? And I wanted to explain a few things to him. My sponsor said, nah, I don't think so. Sounds to me like you got a resentment. Such a genius, my sponsor. He said, better sit down and write. I'm resentful at blank for ripping people off in AA and making me look bad. It affects my self-esteem, pocketbook ambition, personal relations, and sex. Another 5-bagger for me. What are the defects of character in me that if God would remove, the resentment would be gone? I have unreasonable expectations. This guy's acting like an untreated alcoholic. What's he supposed to act like? I'm judging him, a retaliator. I'm playing God. I'm not trusting in God. If I did, I know things were the way they were supposed to be. I'm a people pleaser. I care more about how I'm being seen in AA than what this guy's going through. I'm self-centered. I think it's about me, as opposed to self-seeking, which is trying to figure out what's in it for me, as opposed to selfish, which is like it's all mine. And I am unwilling to accept the fact that another child of God could be spiritually sick like me. And therefore I'm a hypocrite. And here's a new one. For me, I'm spiritually prideful. I didn't get that till I came in AA and became a spiritual Goliath. How could a man comport himself thusly after coming into a contact with a man of my spiritual caliber? It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. If a man is sick and I can't accept the fact that he's spiritually sick, it says in our book, if I can accept he's spiritually sick, I'd show him the same tolerance, pity, and patience I would cheerfully grant a sick friend. If I can't, then obviously one of my defects is I am unwilling to accept the fact that another child of God could be spiritually sick like me. And I had to go to God in 6 and 7 and ask for the removal. And when I say, Father, remove it, I had to ask him the biggest question I have ever asked in Alcoholics Anonymous. Father, what can I do for you? What can I do for you? Please do this, I'll do that. Tell me what to do. That's a relationship. That's when my sponsor explained to me, that's the give and take, you know. Otherwise, I got God running all over town doing stuff for me, you know. And I heard, man, I got scared. I came into AA, and please, don't take this as an indictment of anybody else's program. This is just what happened for me. I came in and I heard people talking about God getting them parking spaces. And I said, oh man, what if he messes up? What if I don't get a space? What if that happens? I got to get a God not involved in parking. I got to get a God that has nothing to do with parking at all. I really had to get a God big enough for me to be able to function where I wasn't setting him up to fail. And my sponsor said, your God's not big enough yet, you use mine, and I did. So I kept my mouth shut, and sometime after this, this guy called me, and he had a fatal illness, and he was dying, and he had called a city agency, and they said, all we can do is take you down to County General and dump you off at the door. And I knew that wasn't true because I had done my job in Alcoholics Anonymous. And he couldn't call anybody else because he had burnt everybody else out. I had not told him what I had thought of him. And he called me. I was the only guy left. So I got to be there for another guy during his death when I couldn't be there for my father, and it was lifted from me, and my father came back into my life. And the amends was made. And I was able to tell his grandchildren about him. And that horrible, cold, painful place that every time I looked at it, all I could do was wince, was gone. My mother-in-law asked me to say grace last Christmas. We were talking, she and I, some time ago, and we were talking about prayer. And I'll tell her story a little bit here. She told me that one of her prayers was that she said, God, thank you for making Scott so strong. She gets it. She gets it. She knows that this power didn't originate with me. It has nothing to do with me. If you're new here, I want to welcome you to Alcoholics Anonymous. I want to suggest to you that you have been treating your own alcoholism and your treatment's not working. My children are enjoying a remarkable recovery. My wife and I are going to celebrate 17 years of marriage this June. We've stopped working on our relationship. My idea of working on a relationship is to talk to you until you change your mind. Until your eyes roll back in your head and you keel over, and on the way down you go, okay. Nancy is my wife, my lover, my buddy, and my bride. I adore her. I adore being married to her. I'm very excited about our partnership and this adventure that we're on. I'm glad that she's hearing these Al-Anon speakers this week, and I hope she listens to all of them. My children have found an entire class of grown-up who's terrified of them, and that's the new men who come to my house. Some years ago, a guy came over, and my 8-year-old Jesse walked up to him and said, "What step you on, pal?" A couple of months ago, Jesse's now 11, a guy had done some fifth-step work on Wednesday. He came over Thursday night to finish, and without looking up from his homework, the guy walked in, without looking up from his homework, Jesse said, "What's the matter, dude? Blew it last night? Got to do it again?" It's the kind of home we have. My wife walks through the room. This is a couple of months ago, and I'm on the phone. This is the kind of conversation we have. I'm on the phone with the new guy, and all she hears is this. "Okay, let's say the aliens are coming." All right? Let's say they're coming. I'm an Alcoholics Anonymous. I have no opinion on outside interests. Let me ask you a question. Why are they coming for you? You live in North Hollywood. You have no life. Why are they going to traverse a universe for you? The guy's sleeping with a Bible on his forehead. Square business. I went, yeah, I never thought of that. I said, yeah, maybe they'll look the president up. I don't think they're coming for you. Unbelievable. I share this, I try to share it every time I share. My son, who was so grievously ill from alcoholism, who was making those sounds he couldn't stop and was reading and writing years below his grade average, a couple of years ago was accepted into the most prestigious scholastic program for junior high school students in the United States. He's done the program his way, which has annoyed my wife and myself tremendously, but he is in the program. A couple of years ago, I asked my kids, I was making them lunch, and I've been sober for a couple of years, and I said, "Mike, what do you want on your hot dog?" He said, "I want mustard, onions, and lettuce." And I said, "Lettuce?" He said, No, I don't want lettuce." And he walked away, and he came back and he looked at me right in the eyes, and I'm not altering one syllable. He said, "I will never again allow your opinion of what I want affect what I ask for." The thing that I saw in Milton's house is in my house. That thing that's in Milton's house is in my house. And all I had to do was do a few simple things. All I had to do was this work. If you're new here, please come back. Please come back, and just come back long enough to get a diagnosis. Come back long enough to see if you have alcoholism. Just take the test. Take the test. Welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. Welcome home. Thanks for letting me share.